Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I appreciate you joining me today. What we're going to talk about today is crucial for your long-term financial success. We are going to talk about salary and compensation negotiation, both how to do this and why it's important. I prefer to start out with the overall impact to hopefully get you guys to understand why it's worth negotiating your salary as early as possible in your career and at every given opportunity of your career. So quick statistics here. I'm just diving right in. Career Builders did a survey of a few thousand employers asking them how many expect people to negotiate salary. What do you think? You think 10% of employers, 30% of employers, 70% of employers, 90%? What's your guess? The result is 73% of employers expect salary negotiation during the hiring process. 3 out of 4. Are you negotiating as if that's the expectation? Because it is. This isn't a 51%. This isn't a 60-40 scenario. This is 3 out of 4 employers are expecting this. This is the baseline expectation that you are negotiating. And if you're not, you're already coming in under expectation. The same Career Builder survey went out to a few thousand candidates and asked, how many of you accept the initial job offer and how many of you negotiate? 55% of people accept the initial offer without even attempting to negotiate. So that's over 1 in 2. So 55% of you out there are leaving money on the table. And while some of you might say, oh, well, that almost maybe lines up with gender workforce differences. No. This is both a men and women problem. Because Pew did research on the gender differences here. And yes, men do negotiate more, but we're talking 32% of men negotiated and 28% of women. So it's pretty negligible. Like, I understand 4% in this grand scheme is a decent difference, but you can't sit here and say, oh, well, the 55% of workers or the 50% of workers that aren't doing it are mostly women versus mostly men, and it's personality type difference. Nope, it's failure on both parts. All of you are just leaving money on the table. Well, 45% of you are just leaving money on the table. Sorry, 55% are leaving money on the table. And I don't know if you understand how small negotiations add up over time. And that's one of the things I want to get into for a second here. So let's dive a little bit into the overall cost this is to you. Because by not negotiating, it is actually costing you money. This is what you're losing out on. So let's do some simple math here. So if we have 2 candidates that are going for the same job, and the initial offer is $45,000, and person 1 accepts it, so the 55%. Second person negotiates just simply a $5,000 increase to $50,000. Okay, let's assume both these people don't get any promotions. They stay in this position their entire career, and they both just simply get 1% raises, which, if I'm being fully honest, if you're getting a 1% raise, you should probably look for a different company. But that's maybe a separate discussion for a different day. But if both these people, 45,000 and 50,000, get 1% raises every year for 40 years, average maybe career length, if you start at 18, you go to 58 years old, a few years before retirement, the person who negotiated that $5,000 increase makes $600,000 over the course of that 40-year career. Now, the key here is that 1% raise. Because if you do the 40-year career at a $5,000 increase, that's $200,000. That's all that is. So the other $400,000 that the candidate who negotiated is making over that 40-year lifespan is from the 1% annual raises, which is terrible. So imagine if you do get a 3, 4, 5, 6% annual raise every year for that simple $5,000 early on. You're talking millions of dollars. And here's what that could kind of look like. So again, if you take the same 2 people, same starting salaries, $45,000 and $50,000. So the person who negotiated that $5,000 increase, let's also say that not every year but every 3 years. So just every few years after they've maybe built up a huge achievement list and repertoire, they're able to achieve a 4% raise. And every other year is still that 1% standard. That gap of 600,000 is now over $1 million in that same 40-year time span. The overall estimated for average person over the course of their lifetime from Carnegie Mellon, specifically I believe the economist was Linda Babcock. Might be wrong, fact check me on that, but I remember it was Carnegie Mellon, is that the average person is leaving on the table between $1 million and $1.5 million over the course of their lifetime. So let's say we're doing this in a 40-year career. Let's take that low end, $600,000. So that's going to be roughly about what, $15,000 a year, if I'm doing that math correct. Maybe it's a little bit more. I believe that's about $15,000 a year. So that $15,000 a year, if you did get let's say a 5% return, you were able to invest that every single year, that you average that out. You got a 5% return. I mean, you're talking an insane amount of money that 15,000 would simply immediately on that 5% turn into an additional, let's see, 16,250, and then that's going to compound on itself. So that alone is now in the millions of dollars of scenario. If we are talking about that 4% raise every few years and then 1% elsewhere, and we're talking that over $1 million, if you had that invested over the 40-year time span, you're talking millions of dollars. So it's one of those things to where people that are really struggling or don't understand how people become millionaires or they become wealthy or independently or retire early, this is a factor. This is a huge factor. And that initial number of going, oh, it's just $5,000 a year. I mean, what does that really cost me? This is what it can cost you. Is it can cost you millions of dollars on the table, because these estimations of the 600,000, the 1 million, and the average of 1 to 1.5 million, these are just salary earnings. These are not including if you invested them and compounded it and put it into assets and they earned interest, or you went into real estate and the market grew. This is not any growth. This is flat cash if you just stuck it under your mattress and let it go there. So without a doubt, you are leaving millions and millions of dollars on the table. And we're talking about 1% annual raises and $5,000 negotiations. It is not unreasonable to have 10, 15, 20, 30, $50,000 negotiations, depending on your career path. And again, with the annual raises, to not have 1%, but instead to have 3, 4, 5, and 6 consistently every year in your career. To use my own early career life story to give an idea here, my first role when I was 17 years old in the IT industry was working for Geek Squad. And I went from Geek Squad making $12 an hour to IBM that I negotiated up to $18 an hour. Initial negotiation started at $16, but I got to $18 an hour. Then from IBM, went on to my first full-time employment job, which was $42,000 a year. Not a big raise there when you factor it in the grand scheme, considering $18 an hour roughly translates to about $36,000 a year. So I got a $6,000 raise in that capacity. And that one, I didn't have a lot of negotiation power. This is one of the things we'll get into, is understanding your leverage and being realistic about the scenario. I was relocating to a different state, so I was definitely a bigger question mark. I didn't have a lot of negotiation power, so I had to make it up on the back end. Next role went from $42,000 to $60,000 a year. So now we're talking an $18,000 increase, and that was about a $4,000 negotiation, if I remember at that time correctly. Then from 60, I jumped immediately up to actually 110 in my next job. And that was a negotiation of $12,000 that I had in that. And none of this is including the other aspects of compensation, PTO, benefits, et cetera, et cetera. So as you can see there, right, you know, if we take each one of those individually, 12 to 18, and I negotiated 110 to 120, 110 to 120, 120 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 $2 an hour there. So that's $4,000. The next one was 18 to 42. Didn't really negotiate there. The next one from 18 to 60, I negotiated $4,000 there. And then my next one from the 60 to the 110 was about a $12,000 negotiation. And this was all in a span from 17 until 23. So this was in 6 years. I went from $12 an hour, $24,000 a year, to 110. That's the power of not only just moving up in your career, because that's what a huge chunk of those flat numbers were, but also negotiation, because we have $20,000 in there just in negotiation. So out of that 110, almost 20% of it that I earned over time was through negotiation. That is the power. And that just continues to compound, because you're never going to take your next job for less than your current one, unless it's just a very unique scenario. So that's my personal early career story. And then it only continues to grow from there. So hopefully you understand a little bit why this is important. Now, let's say money is not your driver. You don't necessarily care about that. Okay, fine. Let's look at this from a soft skill perspective. What goes into salary negotiation? We'll get into the specific tactics here in a second, but I want to cover 50,000 foot view. You got to know how to research. You got to know how to self-evaluate. So you got to be very self-aware. You have to know how to look at the job market and kind of predict the future and predict where things are going. You have to know how to sell yourself. You have to know how to self-advocate, and you have to know how to be confident. Can you tell me an area of your life where these skills are not important? When is it not important to be able to advocate for yourself? When is it not important for you to be confident? When is it not important for you to be able to do research? When is it not important for you to maybe be able to look ahead and look at the future and make some sort of prediction as to what that looks like? These are all soft skills that in every area of your life, your relationships, your art, your logic, your family, your friends, your career, every single aspect, these soft skills matter. And at a minimum, you have a chance to exercise your skills in these realms every year at your annual review for negotiation, or every time you job hunt. And that's assuming your company only does annual reviews. Maybe they do bi or semi-annually. Maybe they do quarterly. You should take that chance to negotiate every time, because it's practice. The worst case scenario, you end up where you're at. Best case scenario, you make millions of dollars over your lifetime. Or you also just make yourself a better person and better for you on the soft skill side. Grand scenario, you end up with millions of dollars and a better person. Isn't that worth it? Something so simple. Okay. So I talked about kind of what goes into this, right? Being confident, self-advocacy, doing research, predicting the future. So let's talk a little bit about how to go about this, because I'm hoping at this point you understand the importance of why I'm making a video about this, and that hopefully you can start doing this either immediately in your career, or maybe you're just entering it. And even if you're late in your career, start now. It doesn't hurt. Still could be tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. So hopefully between the money and who you are as a person and the soft skills you gain, you understand why I'm making this video. So where do we start? So we start with research. And your research is going to be contingent on two things: the sources of where you're getting your information from, and a level of self-awareness. You have to be able to judge yourself accurately and compare yourself to others. This is going to be probably the one of two hardest barriers for the average person to overcome, is because we are taught to not compare yourself to people, to not look at and judge whether or not you are better than, lesser than, equal to actually assess yourself in an accurate way and be willing to go, you know what? I'm awesome at this and I'm terrible at this simultaneously. These are not things that we are taught, nor are we advocated to do throughout our lives. And it is a core component of being a professional over and over and over again, not just from a compensation negotiation perspective, but also if you want to make a difference in a company, that you're going to have to sell a vision. You're going to have to sell a solution. You're going to have to present an idea, create an initiative, stand out from everybody else. And you're not going to be able to do that if you're not self-aware and comparing yourself to other people. So step one, do research. At least just get an idea of what's out there. Then you can begin to self-evaluate and leverage your self-awareness. So I myself, I use 3 different sources. Not all of these are going to work for you. 2 of them will because they're pretty industry agnostic, but one of them is pretty scoped to specific industries. So I use Robert Half, PayScale, Glassdoor. Always use multiple sources. That way you can look at an average, look at a median of the salary and qualifications and where you actually stand. Putting all your chips into one basket is almost never going to work for you, especially because you'll see fluctuations in here and sometimes pretty big ones. Now, Robert Half is a recruiting agency. I believe they're the largest in North America, maybe the largest in the world, but I'm pretty sure they're the largest in North America. And they're in a variety of industries: finance, manufacturing, IT, technology, those sorts of things. So if you're not in an industry for them, then you might want to look elsewhere. But they are a crucial source that I use. And also you can find another top recruiting agency for your industry. If you want to watch my video on how to find a good recruiter, please watch that. That'll give you some insight. But you can also use general sites like the PayScale and Glassdoor. You could use your job search tools. So LinkedIn, Indeed, Monster, ZipRecruiter, these will have some as well. Now, the key thing to note with all of this research is it's on reported data. So it's going to lag behind the market a little bit. Or you take into account of Robert Half to where they lag behind a little bit, but some of their stuff is also projected. So like they send out a salary estimator at the beginning of every year saying, hey, here's what we think this is going to be based off of the previous year's data. So there's a level of projection as well, and that's our estimation. And that's why we're also looking at multiple sources to really get a feel for the overall consensus. Okay, so now what are the factors in your research? Factors in your research are going to be, how many years of experience do you have? Now, this needs to also be tailored to what have you achieved? Because that's really what these are doing. So when you're looking at job descriptions, job roles, or maybe the criteria on these sites that you're looking for the salary expectations, you might not necessarily be able to say, I have 5 years experience, but if you're looking at kind of their description of what that role should be in 5 years experience, you might be doing that at 3. You might be doing that at 7. You might be doing that at 10. So the achievement matters a lot more than the exact number of years of experience, because that's how you're going to sell yourself. Hey, based on my research and someone who has accomplished A, B, and C, this is what the market is telling me, or my research is telling me that this position is worth. It's going to be a lot more achievement-based, but these are the 2 metrics that you can use. Some sites will only use years of experience. And so this is where you might have to look at job descriptions and job boards to kind of figure out what a 5-year, 10-year, mid-level, entry-level, senior-level position in your given industry and realm is going to be, and say, how much of this am I doing? How much could I do? That sort of component. So this is where we're beginning to get into self-awareness, is where do you actually rank? Am I a 3-year industry vet, but I'm operating like a 6-year industry vet? Or am I the opposite? I'm a 6-year industry vet operating like a 3-year industry vet. You need to be willing to admit and analyze both of these things about yourself. Another key component is, what industry are you in? Again, going back to my personal story, I learned very quickly that the oil and gas industry overpays for everything. They want to pay for the best talent. They have the money to do so, and they will not shy away from flaunting it. You compare that to something like the nonprofit industry. We'll go to the complete opposite extreme. Nonprofits are generally going to try to be saving money because they're nonprofit. So you have those, different dichotomy in different industries that even for the same role with the same function and the same stress level and the same company size, all of these things are just going to have a variance. So you need to make sure you're looking at an industry. And this is why I like to have something like a Robert Half in my back pocket, is because your PayScales and Glassdoors, Salary.com, Indeed, LinkedIn, Monsters, etc., they're going to give you national averages, location averages, these sorts of things. And they're going to give you averages at a much broader stroke. But if you have a recruiting agency on the back end, or somebody you can reach out to in that realm, or that just sends out that information in industries they specialize in on a regular basis, now you can hone in on some industry-specific information. So understanding the industry. And then the last biggest factor is going to be geography. And this is going to matter even if remote. Now, people are going to be confused about this, but when it comes to remote roles, you actually have two different geographies you need to consider, and it's up to the company to decide which one they use. It could be your geography. So I always recommend, regardless, looking at your living geography. And if you were to go on site, where would you be working? Is it in a big city, medium city, small city? Are you rural? Whatever it might be. Look at what employers around you are paying, because then you guaranteed take that into account. Now, the other one is going to be for a company specific one to where they may base it off of where their headquarters is. So this is one that's going to be unique that you need to figure out as you're going through the hiring process, figure out where they are, where the regional offices or their headquarters are, whatever it might be that they're going to use, so that you can come to the negotiation table effectively. And you're not going to figure this out by just asking them, hey, when I'm looking at salary negotiation research or salary research, which geography are you going to base it off? You're just going to ask, hey, I notice this is a remote position. Where are you guys based out of? What's your closest office to me? Or where is your headquarters located? You're going to ask it more in the frame of an informational question. You take that down, apply that to your research. So your three biggest components for research are looking at the years of experience / what have you achieved and what you are actually capable of doing. Because again, years of experience is not a perfect measurement. The industry that you are looking at being hired in, and the geography of both yourself, and if it's a remote position, then where the company is located. If you're looking at on-site or hybrid, then the geography is just going to be where you're looking at physically looking to and commuting. So those are going to be your biggest factors when it comes to research. Now, this is going to maybe be a little bit obvious, but now that you've done this research, write it down. Put it in a document, put it in a notebook, put it somewhere that when you do get to this salary negotiation stage, you're going to have this on deck. You have your ducks in a row so that you can come prepared and confident to the table. So write it down. Now, based off of this, so once you have this information, the next action item for yourself is, what are your non-negotiables? You can't necessarily accurately determine your non-negotiables before you understand what your geography, industry, and overall experience is going to be, because otherwise you're going to just be pulling unrealistic or potentially things out of your butt in the wrong direction. Okay. I did this before. It's something to where I undershot myself because I just said, I think I'm worth this. And then come to find out I had a coworker making $15,000 more because I had moved to a different city. That city was paying more than my previous city, and I just didn't factor in geography. So a lot of these lessons I'm giving you are learned the hard way. So even I myself have left money on the table and have been fighting the rest of my life to make sure that it's not left on the table ever again. So once you have your realistic figures, then determine your non-negotiables. What is your minimum? What is your nice to have? What is your, I would take this in a heartbeat, no questions asked, where do I sign on the dotted line? Come up with all three of those figures. If it is commute or hybrid or remote, what is your negotiable and non-negotiable there? There are certain roles in certain industries that being remote just isn't an option, or is so rare that do you really want to set yourself up to only have 3% of the employment options within your given specific opportunities? So non-negotiables are things that are truly baseline, unacceptable. You will not deviate from this. Everything else is negotiable. And so this is actually going to lead into something that I'm going to sum up as simply, don't set yourself up for failure. So you're going to have your non-negotiables, and that's what they should be deemed. Then you need to also determine what your negotiables are and define those in terms of those three different salary ranges I said: your base minimum, your awesome, I will accept, and your holy crap, didn't think I was worth this, sign on the dotted line. Remote, hybrid, on-site, PTO requirements, 401k match, overall compensation package, culture, industry. Is the company green, or do they support social and political initiatives you align? Whatever it might be. So these other things are negotiable. This whole video is off salary negotiation. You can't expect the company to negotiate with you if you are not willing to negotiate with them. So defining both of these things up front are key. I forget who said this, so I'm sorry I can't give credit, but a successful negotiation is when both people walk away feeling like they won. So you can't be the only one dictating the terms, just as much as the company can't be the only one dictating the terms either. So that's what you need to understand. And this is going to be key to not setting yourself up for failure. So like, great, you have your research. Now build your non-negotiables. Now build your negotiables. And then you can start to round out that picture as to what you're going to come in at. Now, the biggest piece of leverage that either of you have, the company you're looking to work for or yourself as the candidate, is, are you willing to walk away? It is typically much, much, much easier for the company to walk away because it is unlikely you are the only candidate in the pipeline that they have or that will be successful and they'll be happy with. So almost all the time do they have the leverage in this scenario, or at least more leverage than you in terms of willing to walk away. Doesn't matter. Don't care. Always be willing to walk away unless you are in that desperation mode and desperation scenario. Just because they have more leverage in this scenario, don't guarantee them 100% leverage in this criteria. Give yourself as much leverage as you can. Be willing to walk away and engage when you're walking away with your non-negotiables and negotiables and your level of desperation, because that's what you ultimately have to gauge here, especially in the current job market that is ultra competitive. If you are down and out, racking up credit card debt, and someone comes in and they meet your minimums, you should probably take it. Doesn't mean don't stop searching. Doesn't mean don't look for the grass that's greener on the other side, but you should probably take it. You got 6 months cash stacked up. You're happy, hunky-dory. You're still living completely fine. And they meet your minimums. Walk away. Who cares? Right? You're still good for a period of time. So gauge your level of negotiation, non-negotiables and negotiables, and the results that you get from that with your level of desperation. Again, be realistic. Don't set yourself up for failure. Understand your leverage. Now, here's something that's going to be a little bit difficult for some people to hear, which is that your ego might be getting in the way. To kind of piggyback off of that last scenario, that you have your non-negotiables, you define too many non-negotiables because you think you're able to do that. I promise you're not. Very few people can have a laundry list of non-negotiables. Your non-negotiables are like a handful or less. Everything else is negotiable. So this is where you could be thinking too highly of yourself. And the easiest way to judge whether or not your ego is getting in the way is A, you are getting to that final interview stage consistently, or at least frequently, and never getting an offer. Or B, you are getting offers. You're almost consistently getting offers, but they're coming in underneath what your research showed. So this is where you need to make sure that your experience and achievements are accurate. That is probably going to be where your research is faulty because it's the most subjective element. The industry you're going into is the industry you're going into. And the geography you live in is the geography you live in. Or the geography is the company based is where they are based. So the only one that's really subjective and requires that self-awareness is your years of experience and achievement. So more than likely, if your research is overinflated in comparison to the offers the market is giving you, it's probably your research that's wrong, especially if the offers you're receiving are relatively similar to each other. So again, I bring this into the category of don't set yourself up for failure. So now a little bit of how to have this conversation. So I find that most people can actually have this conversation very easily when they have that research and data. Most people don't want to negotiate because, like I said, they think it's arrogant or that it's not socially becoming or it's not professionally becoming, or they just have no idea where to begin. But if you have 3 or more sources that are telling you based off of all of your criteria, you are worth this range to this range, and you previously were earning this, and it's somewhere in that range, and just all of the data is really aligning, then that is your conversation. Company comes at you and says, hey, I'm going to offer you $50,000 a year. Let's say, I'll give my own story here. These aren't 100% accurate numbers, but we'll stick with this $50,000 example. They come in at $50,000. from the beginning of the application, you said $85,000 is what I need based off of your market research, etc. So you go through the whole interview process. They get to the offer stage. They offer you $50,000. For one, whether you are accepting or not accepting, I don't care. Even if it's that, where do I sign on the dotted line, holy crap number that you never thought you'd get, never accept the offer on the phone. Do not. Take a second to mull it over. Because again, remember, 73% of companies expect negotiation. If their offer is your holy crap number, then maybe you can get your holy crap number. So understand that, again, the expectation is negotiation. So you might get that crazy offer and get overwhelmed with emotion and just want to sign. No. Hey, let me take 24, 48 hours. When you need to know by, I just have a rule of thumb that I don't accept the offer on the phone. I just want to mull it over, review all the details. Can you also send over the additional parts of compensation, like in terms of the benefits, so you can really get your full picture? And this will allow you to decompress, get out of the emotional scenario, etc. And if it's the opposite, 35 grand under offer. I said, you put in 85 and they came back at 50. Same conversation. Hey, I never accept an offer on the phone. Can you please, give me 24, 48 hours to mull this over? When do you need to know by? Or be on the same page with 24 to 48 hours for me to get back to you? Yes? Awesome. Perfect. Okay. So now you just have the subsequent conversation where one of them, again, if it's that crazy high number that they met or are somewhere in the neighborhood of, maybe you tack on a few more percent. Maybe revise your research in these 24, 48 hours. And if you put in 85 as, what you were targeting and they come back with 90, then maybe you do some research and go, oh man, like is 95 within the range or 100 or, I would say you generally have a wiggle room of anywhere between 5 and 10% at a baseline minimum. So if we are talking, they come in at 90, 5% is 4,500, puts you at right around 95. You could also potentially negotiate up to 100 and give them a chance to come back and meet in the middle. And then you end up way over what you thought. On the bottom side, where they're coming in very underneath what you were looking for, here's how this conversation is going to go. You're going to state your case, state you have research, and even be willing to offer over your research to make sure that they know that you're not just pulling shit out of your ass. So, hey, John, I appreciate the offer that you gave me of the $50,000. In my initial application, I put that my salary requirement was 85. That 85 was based off of research from multiple sources when factoring in cost of living, based on the geography of the location, the industry, my experience, etc. Here's what I'm finding. Is there room for negotiation? Because this is what I'm seeing based off of all of the compounding factors is where my salary should fall. You open up that door. Maybe they're willing to meet it. They understand you have your ducks in a row, and you're going to go back and forth from there. I said I'd give you my exact scenario. They came back and said, well, when you look at the other benefits that we offer, there's a reason that we don't offer that top of the line salary. And I said, I'm not asking for top of the line salary. I'm actually asking for median salary based off of the research that I have done. I even had a next leg up that furthermore, I had 3 other simultaneous offers, and I made them aware of this. I have 3 other offers that are in cheaper locales of living with cheaper cost of living, and they are coming in $35,000 higher than you. So this is an unacceptable offer. What are you willing to do? They decided to take a pause. Hey, let's mull it over. I'll see what I can do, and I'll get back to you. So they took a couple days. So they actually took the same tactic that I said for you guys to do, right? And they came back and offered me an additional week of PTO in lieu of the $35,000. And this is where I said, always be willing to walk away. I looked at my level of desperation. I had 3 simultaneous offers. I had enough in savings, and there was no reason for me to accept that offer. So I walked away. The irony was, they also said, let us know if things change in the next week or 2 if you change your mind. Right? That's the thing, is you are leaving yourself in the best professional foot, and maybe you actually just discovered a plan B. So that's an overall framework of how this conversation is supposed to go, is whether it's on the extreme positive or the extreme negative. The conversation on the phone doesn't occur. Stall. I need at least 24, 48 hours. When do you need to know by? Come to an agreement of when you guys will reconvene again. If they're coming in super high, then that's where you're just going to revise your research, prepare to maybe tack on another 5 to 10% of what they are offering. And realistically, what I would expect is if you're going to shoot for that 10%, they're probably going to come back down a little bit. If you shoot for that 5%, you could probably expect them to take it. But just expect that the more that you shoot there, that you're going to expect them to negotiate back. Anything over 10% of an increase, because again, there's a reason I'm focusing on percentages here. You might be risking the offer. You might be coming off too greedy, because if you think about this, if you are talking, maybe you're at the position of 125, 150, 200, negotiating 10% to $20,000, like that could be the difference between the budget and not budget, or being in range and not being in range. So understand that there is a world where beyond 10% is a little dicey. So I advise to stick within that 5 to 10% range. And on the flip side, if they're coming in super low, then the conversation is just reiterating your research. Again, hey, John, based off of looking at the cost of living and the geography, the industry, my achievements, and my years of experience, here's what my research is showing me. I have it from multiple sources. I can send it over if you'd like me to. But here's what I need based off of the research that I'm seeing. And you can be pretty firm because you're willing to walk away. And that's the key. Now, going back to being realistic and being fair example, I'll give you another one of my stories. So I had a role that I was interviewing for that sorry, guys, technical difficulties there. So I had a role that I was going for where I actually ended up being offered something lower than the role I had initially applied and interviewed for. And this was a scenario that obviously my initial salary requirements and even the range that we discussed technically doesn't apply anymore. And since it was lesser than, I had to be realistic. I couldn't continue to stay firm and say, nope, this is what we talked about, and this is what we agreed upon. The situation had changed. So the way that this negotiation went down, this was a one-off. And to be fair, this has only happened once in my career, so I'm not advocating or saying that this is a super common scenario. But we agreed upon a particular range. We agreed upon a particular salary, actually a specific number we actually did agree upon pretty early in the interview cycle. They came back with their offer saying, hey, we actually would like you for this slightly lower position, and here's where we're at. And it was a $20,000 discrepancy. So again, be realistic, be fair, make sure both parties feel like they won. So I asked for $10,000 being in the middle. All of us were happy. I ended up still within my range. I'm still well above my minimum that I needed, but I'm not at the grandiose. So this is where I say, be realistic, be fair. But again, I still negotiated and still got $10,000. And if you took that $10,000 after every single opportunity, again, we're talking millions here. So it's a very simple conversation. It's rooted in your research, and you're just conveying the research you have. You're willing to send it over, and that's it. And you might be nervous the first time you have this. So your nerves are going to go away with reps. And this is where taking advantage of every quarterly review, semi-annual review, annual review, every opportunity you get and every job hunt you get to negotiate every time, you'll have this down in no time. If you have any comments, questions about salary negotiation, leave them down below. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. And until next time, I appreciate you joining me today.